Everyone, it's your boy Matt here. I'm just doing a quick video on to just describe some of my quick political views, just so I don't piss anyone off unnecessarily. It's a complicated thing. I'm here at the SAS Monument in Canberra. It's a good place to start talking about these things because I'm going to start talking about communism, my views on nations such as China, and our relationships with the United States, and potentially what will happen in a war. And being next to the SAS monument's a good place to start, because if there's a conflict, they might be the first people deployed to it. I am not a communist in a real sense. I'm a social democrat. When I say I'm a communist, it's a sort of just because I need a stronger word to say we need to stop fucking around and we need to be really careful about the impacts of wealth on society. Because what's happening is that we've got this top problem. So we've got all the rich people who are just out competing everyone on the market. And particularly in Australia, we have a housing crisis because the rich people keep buying homes as investments. In Australia, we've got two things going on. We've got something called negative gearing, which is where the money that you spend on a property, if it's at a loss when you're renting it out, can then be used to, after you buy it, is then tax deductible. And that's just massively inflated the costs of housing, because now houses are significantly more expensive because there's a tax incentive to invest your money into property. But you'd think that might increase the supply, but it doesn't, because the more supply you have, the less valuable those houses are. And because there's the other issue with it, which is that we've got something in Australia, we don't have a very good, it's not income tax, I'm trying to remember, capital gains tax. So around 20 years ago, when John Howard, who was a famous conservative, he was a neoliberal politician really, he did this thing where he slashed the capital gains tax. So it went from something like 6% to 3%. I'm not exactly sure on the numbers here. My background is in social sciences and a little bit of political economy. I'm not a true economist. Need to make that clear. I do have a good understanding of these things though. Enough that I can sit down with people and understand the narratives and be able to understand the policy which they're providing, and am able to interpret research. But I am not a true economist. You need to make that very clear. I am not an economist. Now, the downside, since then we've had this issue where we've had this massive accumulation of wealth, and the price of housing has skyrocketed. And we now have this issue in Australia where if you don't have rich parents who are going to be able to help you buy a home, you will likely never own a home. And we've now have this massive class divide where it's not based on your occupation, it's based on your parents' income. And for example, I have been locked out of multiple relationships with women because when they figure out that I don't have a home and am not in a position to get a home, because they will literally check to see the wealth of your parents to see if you're going to get income from your parents to help you buy the home, then the relationship's over. That's happened to me, right? That's the reality of the modern world now. So I believe that we need to have a capital gains tax. I think we need to have things like inheritance taxes. I think we need to have, and we need to work towards something called social democracy. And that's what a country like the Netherlands is. The idea is that we have a large amount of income in the state, which is generated through taxation, and the taxation of natural resources. So in Australia, our natural resources are not taxed, we just give them away. It's very strange. It's like this because the oil and gas companies have a significant influence over politicians. And the way that our society works is that because of the Cold War, there was this propaganda which really came from the Americans, but it worked its way here, that really we need to believe in the true power of the free market, and that wealthy people are good people. That's not the case at all. Wealthy people will do what they can to protect their wealth, and they will form mafias and coalitions to keep their wealth. Countries like the Netherlands, countries even like fucking Qatar, right, have a strong national interest in their oil and gas reserves. And what happens is that because of that, the oil and gas then gets taxed and then gets used to pay for public infrastructure. And those resources are maintained and kept operating because the government understands how important they are to the economy. In Australia, these were stolen through political manoeuvring by the oil and gas companies. They were not taxed, right? So I'm soon going to acquire a lot of wealth. I'm going to use that wealth to try and get the capital gains tax in Australia. I'm going to lobby for it to go back to the year 2000 levels. I'm going to hope that I get taxed heavily and I'm able to use, and my tax will then help build Australia. That's what I want. And I want these fuckers in the oil and gas industry to do the same things. Now, in regards to China and the United States, my view is that I want Australia and the United States to decouple, but not completely. What I want is I don't want us to be forced into a war with China. I'm not saying we shouldn't go to war with China at some point. Everything we should do to avoid that outcome we should do. But it's clear that the Americans do not have our best interests at heart. They ripped us off with AUKUS for billions of dollars. That was under a democratic regime. Now they've got the Republicans in power. And it's not just the Republicans, because we did very well with the Americans under George Bush. Like I was just shit-talking Johnny Howard, but the idea is that John Howard and George Bush, they got along so well that it resulted in hundreds of Australians dying, not hundreds of Australians, I'm not sure the exact number, but many of us dying in Iraq and Afghanistan for stupid wars. But the idea is that we'd ingratiate ourselves with the Americans by being their best pals, and it would pay off for us. And we've been horribly betrayed and terribly treated by the Trump administration. And Australia will never see the United States the same again. We are no longer going to be the sheriff of the United States in Southeast Asia. We will be our own middle power. And what's going to happen is that we need to decouple ourselves from the United States, and we need to make sure that we don't get dragged into war with China. Now, on China, I need to say something. The Chinese attitude towards things is that they are permanently scarred by the treatment by the West through the Opium Wars and the following oppression by the Japanese, and this, I think they call it the century of humiliation. The point with them is that for them, they have in the center of their national identity and their national religion, they have this idea that they will not tolerate interference by the West in Chinese affairs, and when China says it wants to be great and it wants to have a nationalistic tendency which is fueled by conquest and land, well, for them they don't give a fuck about us and what pressures we put on them. Now, because of this, we need to understand that that's a nation which is very easy to get into wars with, but it makes sense why you'd want to go to war with that kind of attitude. And that's my point, is that the relationship between China and the United States and Australia is a complicated thing, and my biggest thing is that Australia is able to maintain our independence in these relationships. So that's my quick rant for today. I just wanted to clarify things. I don't want to be accused of having a political stance I do not have. I want Australia to... I really am advocating for policies that we've historically had in Australia, and on top of that, I want us to work towards making sure we have appropriate taxation for these freeloaders in our industry sector. Have a good one.